Since we've been talking about citizens, I'd like to bring in Rob Ford, Professor of Political Science at the University of Manchester. Rob, one thing we haven't touched on yet is this slightly awkward interplay between citizenship and voting, in the sense that although just under 10% of the UK's population doesn't have British citizenship, that doesn't mean that all of them can't vote. Some of them can. Who are they, and why is that the case, Rob?
All people with Irish citizenship or Commonwealth citizenship can vote in UK parliamentary elections from the moment that they arrive. It's even more of an open franchise for devolved elections. So if you're voting in the Scottish Parliament or Welsh Senate elections, you just have to be legally resident here. You can be a citizen of any country. But in Westminster elections, we draw a distinction between Irish and Commonwealth citizens who get the vote from the moment that they take up residence in Britain, and citizens of all other countries who never get the vote at all, however long they're here, unless they get British citizenship.
Presumably there is a reason why Commonwealth and Irish nationals got the vote in the UK. What was that reason initially?
The historical roots of this go back to 1948, when a piece of legislation called the British Nationality Act was passed. Before that, British citizenship wasn't legally defined at all. That act basically gave it a legal definition. And at that point in our history, British politicians were very concerned about relations with the former empire, with the Commonwealth and so on. And Ireland was also very much on their minds. So they extended political rights in what was meant to be a reciprocal arrangement to all citizens of all Commonwealth countries and the Irish Republic. And that right has never been rescinded. In fact, that right also extended to the right to come and live and work in Britain. Those rights were rescinded, but the political right, the right to vote here, that's been retained ever since, which means even now, if a citizen of, say, India or Nigeria comes to Britain to study in one of our universities and takes up residence in a hall of residence and registers, they can vote in our general elections, even though, say, an EU citizen who's been living here 50 years but never took British citizenship, they don't get to vote at all, even if they've been here for many decades.
So what do you think would happen if we decided to be even more open in a way and said, oh, actually, if you've lived here for 5 years, you have permanent residency, you have the right to remain, we're going to give you the vote? What would happen politically, and would that demean in some way the idea of citizenship that underlies many of our political rights?
What that change would do is to bring the rules more in line with what the public say they want to see. So academics have polled the public about when they think people should get full political rights, voting rights and so on. And roughly 85% of people think that everyone living here should get voting rights after a period of a maximum of 5 years. A lot of people say it should be even shorter than that. So the current situation in which you can be living here your whole life, and if you don't take citizenship, you never get voting rights, that's not actually what the public as a whole say they want to see. So it would bring things in line with public opinion. In terms of the political impact, I mean, because some of the largest migrant origin groups resident here already have these rights, the main political impact in practice would be to bring in very large communities of mainly EU citizens who are the largest sort of migrant origin groups who currently don't have these voting rights. All told, they're not a huge part of the population, but it would mean a more coherent and consistent set of rules for who does and doesn't get to vote.
The government recently has enfranchised a group who had been deprived of a vote, and that's British nationals who have lived overseas for more than 15 years. So why is that the case? What were the government trying to do with that, and how consistent are our expat voting rules with those that other countries have?
I assume it's that you haven't lost your citizenship rights and therefore you shouldn't lose your right to vote. It does further increase the sort of logical inconsistency of the Westminster franchise, because you then have a situation where people who've been living perhaps most of their adult lives in another country, they're working in that other country, they're paying their taxes in that other country, and yet they get to have a say on the government of this country to which they have no connection, while on the flip side you have people who've been here for 20 or 30 years paying taxes and working don't get the franchise. It's a very inconsistent set of rules in that respect. And I don't know every single country's case, but I do know, for example, the case of Poland. I have family from Poland. And in Poland, you can continue to vote after living for quite a long time abroad. I'm not sure exactly what the cutoff is. So I think this is not unusual, particularly countries with large overseas populations. They not only have maintained voting rights for those groups, but sometimes they even have special arrangements in terms of particular seats in Parliament, particular representation processes to give those people a voice, because they're seen as an important part of the broader community of that country. So I don't think generosity on this is necessarily wrong in principle. It's just the combination of a very generous franchise for people who've left the country versus a very restricted franchise of people who've come here.